Well, good morning, my stitchy friends. Yes, it's actually October the 30th at 1:09 a.m. and we are back for another episode of Stitching After Dark. So welcome to the NeedleBugg, everybody. My name is Karen, and tonight we are going to talk a little bit about gridding your fabric, and then we're going to stitch a little bit on God Shed His Grace. So I hope that the gridding part will be helpful for all of you. But first, I want to welcome all the new subscribers. There have been quite a few lately. So thank you very much for that, for clicking that subscribe button. And I hope you find some things here that you like and will come back. And to all my returning subscribers, thank you so very much for continuing to hang out with me. And hopefully we will continue to have some fun and you will never know what to expect. Yeah, we're always up for a challenge here of having bloopers and never quite know what's going to happen on any given video between, well, Karen being goofy or technical issues, or there's usually something. So, but I had a question about gridding and how I do that. So I thought it would be a good opportunity to talk a little bit about that. Now, I have in front of me God Shed His Grace that I am currently working on. Okay, I wanted to get to the top. There we go. Which I really am rather enjoying working on. It's a fun stitch. And this sky business does get kind of sort of a little bit boring, but you know what? For after dark stitching, it is ideal. If you remember, in my last, I believe it was my last video, After Dark, I talked a little bit about my gray lines. And you can see, I'll go this way, okay. You can see how, I don't know if it's just me or if they in fact are quite a bit lighter than they used to be. So that when you're stitching and you get it partially covered, I have a hard time seeing it. So I did try marking it with my ceramic chalk pencil. And that's the green that you see. And that is okay too. However, that tends to rub off, which, okay, that's to be expected. But not only that, I should say it rubs off, that then I can't see that either. And when I get some stitches in over it, that also gets a little difficult to see. So I thought, okay, we have to fix this somehow. We really have to fix it, because I, as a full coverage stitcher, do depend on those grid lines for placement of stitches when and if I am parking, which is not all the time, but especially when I'm parking, or even if I am working like here, one color at a time, I do depend on those grid lines to see, okay, am I at the right spot? And if I can't see them very well, you know what, then I might as well not have them. They are of no use to me. Then I might as well do the age-old traditional counting. So I am going to show you how I place my grid lines, okay? Now, if you are starting now this of course is already started, okay? If you are starting a brand new project and you want to put those grid lines in first, how I would do it is, you have already, we're going to make the assumption, you have already figured out the size of fabric that you need. Okay. You already know how big your design area is going to be. Okay. So you have those measurements, and they are either in inches or centimeters, whichever is your, whichever system you use for measuring. Okay. So I may know that this design, we're just going to make it for easy figuring, is 12 by 12. Okay. So it's going to be 12 inches high by 12 inches wide. I think the easiest way, okay, back up here a second. Your design area is going to be 12 by 12. You are going to add 3 inches on each side for your border. So that is going to make it 12, and that's going to be, you're going to add 6 inches to that 12. So it's going to be 18 inches is your piece of fabric. Okay. Now, you could just do the measuring of using that Post-it note or using the little gauges that are out there to determine your 3-inch margin. And then, okay, if I put, I have one here, I think. It's in here, so there it is. Okay, so I would just take my gauge, put it on the edge of my fabric, like so, and then I would know that right there is my starting point. You could do it that way. And you could use that as the place to start your first corner for your gridding. Or if you want to be absolutely certain that your fabric or that your design is centered within that fabric, I'm not going to do the math. It's too late at night to do the math. But what you could do also to make sure it's centered and that you end up with 3 inches on each side is fold your fabric in half and then in half again and find your center. Okay, mark your center with a pin. Now, take your ruler. We already know our design area is going to be 12 by 12. So you have your center mark. Take your center and measure up 6 inches. That's half your design. That would be your top border. Do the same for the bottom border. Do the same out to each side. And maybe you want to put some pins there to mark where those edges are. Okay. Personally, I would start in the center. All right. I would cut my fiber that I'm using to grid. I would cut the length that I need. So you figure you're going to need at least the 12 inches. You're going to need a tail. You're going to need extra to secure the edges. So 12, I would probably cut a piece that is about 20 inches long. That gives you 6 extra inches to play with. All right. I would start in the center and I would divide that length of whatever substance you're going to use to grid in half. And I would use half of it to go from the center to the top, and half of it to go from the center to the bottom. And then I would work off of that center every 10 stitches and go out to each side. After I did that, I would start at the top, or start at the center again. And if I did all the vertical ones first, then I would do next all the horizontal ones and do the same thing. Start in the center. Cut your length I'm going to use Sulky Sliver, Sliver. I would divide that length of Sulky in half. I would use half to go to the right, half to go to the left, and my project will be centered. Okay? Now, hopefully all of that made sense. What you're doing is you're starting at the center and you're working out to give it that extra insurance that your design is going to be centered on that piece of fabric. Does it matter if you're off a little bit? No, it does not. The other thing you could do is use your little gauge and start in a corner and work the same way. As long as you are positive that you measured correctly and you have those 3-inch borders, you can do that. Personally, be on the safe side, start in the center, work up and down, or work vertically or work horizontally. It doesn't matter which you do first, but put your grid lines in. So then the question becomes, like I said, hopefully all of that makes sense. And if it doesn't, let me know. Let me know. And I will try and explain it a little bit further. Now, as I said, what I use is Sulky Sliver. Okay, I have it in 2 colors. I have it in silver and I have it in red. All right, what you use is up to you. It comes in other colors also. Joann's usually has it. You can buy it on Amazon. Mostly any sewing store that sells Sulky will have the metallic thread. And that's what this is. It's a metallic thread. And that's the reason you want to use this. If you use, for example, the 100% cotton Sulky that a lot of us stitch with, and I know a lot of people use it for like long dog samplers, or there's many things that you can use it for, but it's the cotton. If you use that, what can happen is your needle may very well pierce that thread. Now, in some instances, that's exactly what you want because it holds it in place. In this instance, you don't want that because you want to be able to remove this when you're finished stitching. So that is the reason we use the metallic thread, because I think you can see it's very shiny. It's almost like, it's very smooth. It almost feels like a thin plastic to me. So what I recommend using, and I think a lot of people that do their own gridding recommend, is to use this because your needle cannot pierce this. So your needle is going to push it to the side so that it's going to make removing it in the long run much easier. Okay, so I will show you a piece that I started gridding just to give you, well, this piece is the Sewing Woman So you can see the little bit that I have done in all my parked business. Okay, so let's bring that over here. All right. There we go. Park threads, my friend, park threads. Okay. So how I started this here in this corner because I had already started stitching. And instead of drawing the grid on, I thought, you know what? It's time we give sewing the grid on an honest, concerted effort. In the past, what really bothered me about sewing it on was I felt like my thread that I was using to do the grid lines was so floppy. It flopped around, and it let me, I kept questioning, is that exactly where that line is? But what I was not doing is I was not securing it at the end. I was just letting it a loose end, gridding, and letting a loose end at the bottom. So, or at each side, so it could loosen up, as opposed to staying tight where the thread stayed in place. So that is one thing I learned when trying to put grids in. Actually, this is the first time. No, it's not the first time. It's the first time that I put grid lines in that they seem more secure than they have in the past. So I will continue stitching on a sewing woman. And no, I have not gotten very much done on her. I'll tell you a little bit about why in a little bit. But yeah, I got some lines in, and we're going to give it a good effort to see if that makes a difference. There's so much controversy on the friction pens. For example, the washable markers, you know, some people have never had any problem with them. Some people use them once and they don't always all come out. So, you know, if you use this metallic thread, you're pretty much guaranteed that you're not going to have any grid lines showing from whatever you use to mark the lines. You may have grid lines showing for other reasons, but whatever you use to mark the lines is not going to come back to haunt you, which it sometimes can do. So what I did on this particular piece is I started up here, for example, and I did some extra stitches to secure it. Okay, I did through a couple squares some back stitching. Okay, so I would stitch it on itself, so to speak. So I came over a thread, under a thread, then over this thread and under this thread, and then did it again, then started going down my grid line, so that I had some tension there, and it was going to be easier to get out maybe than a knot. How I gridded this is I went under 4 over 6, under 4 over 6, under 4 over 6, and I repeated that for the length of the design area. Okay, I put these in because I'm working up in here, so I wanted a good section to have them in all the way around. And I did the same thing going in this direction, over 4, under 4, over 6, under 4, over 6, and so forth. Well, then, Karen got a little lazy. Do you see what happened on that last line? And do you see what happened on this line? Karen said, "Oh my God, I don't feel like doing all this counting. I'm just going to put in a basting line. Pretty much, well, no, my basting lines in hard hanger, I do count. I do count them out. However, I'm just going to put in a basting line here because you can see, I can tell where the corner is. Okay. It's still obvious, even if my line that I stitched is, I think this one I went over 3, under 3, over 3, under 3. Sometimes I went over 4. Sometimes I went under 4. Sometimes I only went under 2, but I can still very easily tell where my lines are or where my corner, it still defines my 10 by 10 square, bottom line. So how you choose to baste those lines in is certainly up to you. You can do the over 6, under 4, over 6, under 4. I think it was the last day or two, looked at Gemma, because Gemma Stitches has a tutorial out of how she grids, and she does it over 9, under 1, over 9, under 1. So I thought, okay, well, let's try a little bit of that on this and see how that works. Now, as you saw on this piece, I used the red, and that stands out very, very nicely. I mean, you can see that. I think it comes in gold and blue and red and silver, and there may be some other colors too. So I thought, okay, this time, how about if we try the silver? I don't have this on a stand today. I'm just kind of hanging in there with it. Let's try the silver. Why does it seem to be wrapping around? What's this? Oh, I see what happened. Okay, no wonder. Let's try the silver and see how that shows up, number 1. Now, the thing is, you want to be, look, curly cues. You want to be careful with it that it does not knot on itself, because if it does, you're going to have a heck of a time getting it out. And of course, I thread my needle like this. I lay my thread over my finger and I'm holding it tight. I'm laying the eye of the needle over the thread, and then I just do well, this is a little challenging. If it doesn't work, turn the eye over, and then I just do this little push thing, but this stuff is pretty slippy. Okay, that's not going to work on this thread. So my next challenge is to lay it over the needle, pinch it, and then take the eye and push it through the eye, like so. Okay, So I am going to, on this particular strand, oh, I should have brought some. If this kinks like this for you, and I don't have any with me at the moment, get a damp sponge. If it's kinking like this, get that. The more I mess with it, the more it's curling up. If it's kinking like that, get a damp sponge and run it across a damp sponge. Now, I am going to try and knot this a bit, just because of, I'm going to have to start in an area that I have already stitched. And I'll tell you what, this stuff's hard to knot when you want to. Let's try it again. Well, I don't know that that's going to hold, but we're going to get the idea here. Maybe we should try it this way. Oh, we'll see how that works. Okay, so I am going to go. Here we go. I'm going to go down through the fabric. Now, this is going to be easy to grid because there's lines already there that we're just going to follow. Now, so hopefully this will pull through. But it will, so we're just going to let that up there. Okay, and I'm just going to come up on the line. This is how I'm going to do it when I already have stitching in. I'm going to go down on this line. Okay, and I'm going to try Gemma's way. Then I'm going to skip that one stitch. And then I'm going to go down to the next line. And I think I started that. See what I mean? I'm here, I can see where my grid line is very easily, but up here I misjudged it. So we're going to try this again. Okay, so I'm going to go down here and I'm going to come up on what would be the horizontal grid line, I think. I think it's a guessing game, ladies and gentlemen. Okay. So I'm going to leave a tail. Actually, no, I'm just going to leave a tail, okay? And then I'm going to go down one before the gray line. Let's see if I can bring you in a little bit. Oh, a little bit closer and not get too blurry here. See what happens. Okay, so I'm going to go down one before the gray line, and then I am going to come up on what I think is the gray line. Like I said, this is a little hard to see when you're doing it over already existing stitches. So you really want to do this before you start stitching. All right, so now we're going to go down one before the gray line. And we're going to come up here. So this is, I'm trying the count that Gemma uses. So Gemma, I'm being a copycat. I hope you don't mind. Okay, so like I said, this one's pretty easy and there's not much counting because all I'm doing is following existing lines. Okay, just so that I want to be able to see this grid as I complete stitches, because that is my biggest issue, is not being able to see that grid line when I'm stitching, and it gets covered and it gets out of sight. Okay, so this is what you would do. You just keep going. Like I said, if you do this, it's best to do this prior to, oh, what did I do there? I wanted to go down here. It's best to do this prior to doing any stitching, but I'm just going to keep going under 1 over 9. Over 9, under 1, over 9, and I'm just going to follow it all the way down. Now, I am only going to do this at this point for the length of my Q-snip, and that is another thing that you can do, is just, if you don't want to grid the whole thing before you start, grid the area there we go. See, this was starting to work on itself. So you want to make sure that doesn't happen. It was starting to twist on it. There we go, twist on itself. Okay. Just grid an area at a time. So I have all this extra, I could keep going. But if I'm just going to work in this area and then move in this area and then move the Q-snap, I could just grid this area, move my Q-snap, grid the next section that I want to work in, so that I could grid as I go, so to speak. And maybe that is what I'm going to do in this case. If you leave, okay, say I'm going to work in this section and then I'm going to go down, I'm going to work down instead of across. And I have this length of thread extra. I could, when I move this Q-snap down, not cut this off, but hang on to it. When I move the Q-snap down, just continue on with this same one. Or leave a length, leave a nice tail after you finish this, what you're going to work on. Leave a nice tail so that when you do move, you can thread that tail. You can continue gridding down, and as you are doing that, you can pull this so that it comes out up here and keep using this length all the way down. Does that make sense? So what I would do then is, okay, assume that there's thread up here at the top from a section previous. Now I'm going to thread that tail that's left. Oh, I just dropped my spool. Thread that tail that's left, continue gridding this way, and as I'm putting my gridding here, I'm removing it from above. Another option, which in this case, on this piece, that is probably what I'm going to do. It isn't going to use as much thread, which it doesn't matter. I mean, this goes a long way, but it won't use as much. You're already started as you would stitch downward or even across. You can be removing it from here and just using it in that next section you're going to stitch. Just a thought, just a thought. So if we put one in this direction, we do the same thing in the other direction. Boy, this silver is all, I don't think the red was this curly. This silver is certainly curly. I would get a damp sponge and run this over a damp sponge, and that will take the kink out and make it a little bit more manageable, because this is Kink City here. And yes, this stuff is a little bit fiddly, because remember, it is metallic. It is a metallic, and it is thin, and it is slippery. And sometimes it wants to avoid the eye of your needle. So I'm going to put one in the other direction. And again, I'm in a stitched area, so I'm just going to actually, in this case, if you're going to work, that you're going to continue to pull that thread downward as you work down or across, you don't want to put a big knot in there, because then you wouldn't be able to pull it. Okay, so I think this is the line. Let's just assume that that's pretty close. And then we're going to go down on this line. And we're going to come up. Whichever way you do, if you come up one before the grid line, or you come up on the, what would be the 10th stitch, just always do it the same way. Okay. Well, Karen, it helps if you do it correctly. let's start that over. All right, what did I do before? I came up one past. I went down on the grid line. Came up one past. Now, if you're not going to knot this, just be aware of how much tail you're leaving up here, so that you don't continue to pull it through. Come down on the grid line and unthread your needle. But you get the idea. You get the idea. I'm not so sure I like the silver. It does not show up as well as the red. So I think my preference is going to be to go with the red. Okay. So anyway, that is how you grid, or how I grid. And like I said, on that other one, I did not count the ups and the unders, or the overs and the unders. I just willy-nilly'd it because it still gave me enough to be able to see my 10 by 10 squares, to know where the line is, so that if I need to place a stitch that is 3 stitches down from the top border of that 10 by 10 square and 4 stitches in from the left side, I can see enough of the outlines of the squares to be able to figure that out quite easily. Okay, but that is how I would grid. Again, some people do over 6, under 4. Gemma does over 9, under 1. Moi is Mrs. Willy-Nilly. And you know what? The reason I chose that is because I was gridding this in the evening while I was watching TV, okay, with my husband. So I could just start that length and sit here and go like this and go across, just as if you were quilting or whatever. And I could sit here and go like this. Okay, because I could still, like I said, you could still see where my squares are. And I really did not pay a lot of attention to how many threads I was picking up with each rock of the needle. But it was easy to sit there and mindlessly rock my needle back and forth and put that grid line in. So after all of that other explanation, this is what I do. But again, it's up to you. There are many ways to grid. There are lots of videos on YouTube for gridding. It's really up to you. However, all that being said, I would definitely do not use regular sewing thread. Do not use like your 12 weight 100% cotton sulky. Use something that is metallic, something that you cannot pierce. That will make it easier to remove. You know, and when I talk about this, Do you know what it reminds me of? Those of us that are of a certain age will remember this. Back in the day when we used oh my goodness, what was it called? You used that piece of canvas that you tacked onto, say, a sweatshirt or whatever, a sweater, a sweatshirt, a t-shirt, and you stitched over it because it was your grid. And when you went to remove that, you had to make it wet, which, okay, that's fine. However, it was horrendous to get all of those threads out. It was absolutely horrible. At the point where I actually never used that anymore, and if I was going to do any, I actually used a piece of linen because I could pull the linen out a whole lot easier. But now that we have these wonderful metallic threads that can't be pierced, and we can sew that on. Some people use fishing line. Okay. There is also another product on the market, comes in a reel, and that it is just for gridding, and it's a red I don't know, it's thicker than this. Can't remember what it's called, but you can buy other things for gridding, and a lot of the online shops have them. I know 123 Stitch has it. I think you can find it like at Joann's or Hobby Lobby or wherever. But I think the most popular thing to use is Sulky Sliver, S-L-I-V-E-R. Okay. Well, guys, it looks like I have spent almost 50 minutes talking about gridding. And I don't think we're going to get to stitching because it is now 2 a.m. And I have a cat who is just now sitting aside of me who did not wake up. He was napping when they got their last feeding of the day at 11 p.m. And he is now sitting next to me saying, "I think I'm hungry, Mom, and will you please feed me?" So, yeah, we have an automatic dispenser for feeding them, and the dispenser spit out the food, but he was not around to eat it. So what we do is we pick up his and put it up where Odie, my orange cat, can't reach it because Odie is, well, he has a wooden leg. And he will eat all day long if you allow him to eat all day long. And he is already extremely too heavy. So we pick up the food so that he doesn't get it. But now I must go feed Mr. Sir Remy because he is saying, "I'm hungry, Mom. And if I don't soon feed him, he's going to scratch on my leg. And then that hurts." So with that, my dear friends, thank you so very much for joining me this evening. No, this morning. For another fine and wonderful episode of Stitching After Dark. And I will see you the next time. Sleep well, and I will catch you in the next episode. Good night.